and welcome to the show. Last week we met some fascinating small dragons and geckos. Now Australia has so many interesting species of gecko that we thought this week we'd continue over and show you one more interesting family. They are the leaf-tails. And then we'll move on to meeting children's pythons and the frill-necked lizard. Now, first up, I wanted to introduce you to a very interesting species of gecko that lives right under a lot of people's noses, even though they don't even know it. I'm here on the north shore of Sydney, literally in someone's backyard, surrounded by a sandstone outcrop. Now this is the perfect and preferred habitat for the southern leaf-tail, or the broad leaf-tail. It's an interesting gecko because it lives in people's houses, in their sheds, in their garage, and many people in Sydney have never even seen them, but they're around. They're just very cryptic and very secretive. Now it's going to be dark in about 20 minutes, so I'm going to get my head torch and I'm going to be get ready for having a bit of a walk around and suss around these rocks and see if I can find some, because it's only after dark that these animals become active. It's a bit treacherous walking around through here. These honeycomb formations are amazing. I suspect they're formed by millions of years of water dripping underneath these rocks. Some of these caves I can't even see in, they're so deep. There's something in there, but that one's just too deep for me to get to. Oh, I can see something here. I can see scales. I'm trying to get away. I got it. Ah, very tight. Ah. Look at that, beautiful southern leaf-tail gecko with an original tail. It's a male. It's got the big hemipenal bulges at the base of the tail. It's in really good condition. It's trying to bite me. Give him a little go. Little bite. It's having a little bite. Doesn't really hurt. Doesn't have much in the way of teeth. We'll put this guy back and hopefully he can find some females in the not too distant future. See if I can get down from here.
This is Saltuarius salabrosus, rough-throated leaf-tail gecko, one of the largest gecko species in Australia. Certainly not the bulkiest, but in terms of length is up there amongst the largest. Leaf-tail geckos are less commonly kept. They have a few little quirky problems. They're very heat sensitive, despite the fact that many of them come from places like North Queensland and Central Queensland. Where they live, they seek out very cool areas. So heat sensitivity is a problem. At the same time, it also means that no heating is required, no UV lights required. Just keep a reasonably moist enclosure, and they're quite nice. And there's about 6 species currently available of leaf-tail geckos, of which this is the largest. This one has an original tail, so you can see the nice little flutes on the edge of the tail that allow it to blend in nicely with the surface of the trunk that they sit on. I'll just get one out that has a regenerated tail. This is a slightly darker individual, but with a regenerated tail, so you can see it's not quite as ornate. It doesn't have the nice little fine tip to it, but they still blend in quite nicely up against a tree trunk covered in lichen. This is a female. Let's see, no bulges at the base of the tail. compared to the male, which has very obvious hemipenal bulges right there at the base of the tail. So this is Saltuarius cornutus. This is a adult male, and this is your northern leaf-tailed gecko. So this was one of the original species that they've now sort of split everything else off from. Here's a regenerated tail there, so it doesn't have all its nice little fine features. See from underneath there is a male with the big hemipenal bulges. Just there. These guys are a rainforest species, occurring mainly in large fig trees, fig buttresses. They tend to spend most of their time hidden during the day, and then at night they come and they adopt this head down posture where they're quite comfortable and wait for crickets and cockroaches and that to come moving up the trees to feed, where they then pounce on them. So they're very cryptic species. The actually easiest way to locate them is to actually look at their eye shine, because to see their body up against a lichen covered fig tree is very, very difficult, even when you're only within a metre or so of them.
This eastern stone gecko belongs to the Australian genus of Diplodactylus. Its two eggs can be clearly seen within its abdomen. Stone geckos will hatch after about 2 months of incubation at 30 degrees. Hatchlings are tiny and can be quite difficult to feed. Unlike dragons and goannas, once the hatching process has begun, geckos emerge very quickly from the egg. This leopard gecko hatched within 30 minutes of first slashing the egg.
Children's pythons are one of the best captive snakes I think anyone could own. Being small, that makes them ideal for any age, and certainly in their colours that are available in the different species that we've got, and the different patterns and things that come in those different species, it makes for almost unlimited choice in what you've got. If you like, I'll actually show you some of those animals that I've produced, which are now part of the breeding program for the future. So here we have what people would refer to as the blonde mac, which is one of the eastern small blotch pythons from further north in their range, and so she'll certainly be part of the breeding program here. She's what you give things little nicknames, and she's almost the black pattern form for me. She's very dark in her pattern, which is great, with a very light base colour, which is sort of one group of animals that we're focusing on. We have another one, which I'll pull out in a second for you, which is actually chocolate in its pattern. So we get that stark difference between the two of them. And here we have the animal which has the chocolate mark as opposed to the black mark. And now, let's have a look at some babies. So here we have some baby children's pythons with all their feeding information. Baby blonde macs. And also baby Stimson's pythons. We spoke earlier about the different patterns and colours that we can get in the children's python group, and here's just a quick selection of 6 animals and the different colours that are in there. This guy here, this is a New South Wales Stimson's python. This one here who's come to say hello. I'm very excited by this one. I produced this one myself, and this is what they call the patternless children's. Looks like almost like a mini olive python. Then we have a very reduced pattern children's python. So you can see that she has got a lot less pattern than this animal here. And then here's mum of one of the blonde macs, some of the blonde mac babies that we're having a look at before. And you can see with her, she has that stronger, heavier marking to her, the darker marking.
I'm Nicholas Shilko and I'm from the Nowra Wildlife Park. We breed reptiles down there and particularly working on my maculosus line. I brought this here to show it off at the Frog and Reptile Expo here, and this particular animal won first prize in its category. The Antaresia maculosus is nowhere near as pretty as this out in the wild, and we're working on different lines. This is called what's known as a blonde maculosus. And what we're aiming to do is try and get the light pattern even lighter, and even, as you can see possibly in this one, getting a green tinge through it. So to really pale the animal down, because the original wild macs are generally quite dark, very speckly, and their colours aren't well defined. So you can see hopefully that's beginning and is going quite well with this particular snake. Have a number of them this year that we're holding back, and hopefully they will be a few shades better than this one.
Children's pythons produce 1 clutch of eggs per year in early summer. Gravid females should be given a nest box filled with a soft, damp medium in which to lay. This female Stimson's python is young and has produced only 4 eggs. By comparison, this 5-year-old maculosus has produced a clutch of 14 eggs. Sometimes eggs may appear a bit patchy, like these. This is the result of a calcium deficiency in the female. However, in this case, it did not affect the viability of the eggs, and all hatched. As with all pythons, female children will incubate their own eggs. I suggest removing the eggs and incubating them artificially. This young maculosus has just laid a clutch of eggs and is coiled around them in the typical incubation formation. To remove the eggs, gently uncoil the snake and separate her from them. Set up the eggs in a vermiculite medium, and after 2 months of incubation at 30 degrees Celsius, they should begin to hatch. For up to 48 hours, babies may remain in the egg while they absorb their yolk sacs. The smallest of the 4 species of children's python is the pygmy python, Antaresia perthensis. It is in fact the world's smallest python and only occurs on the central west coast of Australia. I travelled there into the Ord Ranges to search for one in the wild. After 2 days and a lot of walking, I finally found one under a slab of rock. Pygmy pythons are still unusual in the hobby in Australia, and rich red coppery coloured individuals such as this are highly prized. The most widely occurring of all the children's python species is the Stimson's python. It is found across most of the arid interior of the continent. Western Australia has some of the most attractive variations, so I went out with licensed reptile collector Dave McIntosh to look for one in the wild. After a long drive through some scenic country, we entered a cattle station, and it wasn't long before we arrived at an abandoned homestead. There was a lot of old building material lying around, which looked promising, so we began to search.
So here in the Pilbara,
There's a lot of old abandoned mining cottages, and they are really interesting to find reptiles. We often come here and search these because it's often easy pickings to find geckos and goannas under some of the loose material lying around, and particularly inside. So yeah, we'll have a look around. Jake, anything under there?
No.
Yeah, there's a gecko, look. Ah, leave it. We've seen plenty of those. Look at this. What's that? No, don't catch it, leave it alone.
Why?
You don't have to catch everything. You don't need those sort of things. All right, come around here. We'll just look around the buildings. There's a lot of rubbers in here, Jake. It's good habitat. Oh wow! Oh mate, we're in luck today. Python on eggs, unreal. Oh, she's already got off her eggs. Hang on. It's a shame we've disturbed her, but hopefully she'll go back on her eggs, so I'll just put it back the way I found it. Oh, she's crawling out the other side.
We also found a nice specimen of Varanus brevicorda under an old door. Brevicorda means short-tailed. This is officially the world's smallest species of monitor and is much sought after by reptile enthusiasts. Possibly the most desirable of all the Simpson's python morphs is the so-called weak-belt stimo. Also from Western Australia, this population is renowned for its lighter background colour, and specimens such as this are highly prized. In recent times, some enterprising keepers have begun to develop lines that can be identified along political boundaries. This is useful in ensuring compatible pairings and keeping the lines pure. And now, onto our last subject for this episode, the frilled-necked lizard, or frilly. It is perhaps Australia's most well-known lizard and occurs across the northern coastal areas of the continent. Typical habitat for the species ranges from the lush tropical woodlands of the north to the drier coastal forests of the south. Southern populations have been impacted by land clearing and urban development. In the north, they have been affected by the spread of the cane toad. These lizards are seldom seen during the dry season, but become active at the start of the rainy season. The frill is erected in defence, and its appearance has the effect of suddenly making the lizard appear much bigger and therefore less attractive as a meal. It is also used by males to display to females. In this rarely seen behaviour, this male is displaying to the female hidden in the grass. For nesting, Females will choose a flat sandy area that receives full sunlight. They may dig a few test holes in different locations to test the temperature of the substrate before finally deciding where to lay their 8 to 12 small eggs. The laying process takes about 20 minutes, and up to 3 clutches per season may be produced if sufficient food is available. When incubated artificially, eggs will hatch in 65 to 70 days. Newly emerged babies are already imprinted with the defensive frilling behaviour and can be somewhat feisty. They require insect food such as roaches, crickets and superworms. Juveniles usually make good feeders and will fight over food. Adults can be accustomed to hand feeding or being fed with tongs. They will reach sexual maturity at about 2 years of age. In captivity, frillies can live for up to 20 years. The road test results for this episode produced the following scores. For the maculosus python, hatchlings go for about $250 each, so on price I gave them a score of 7. Maculosus are regularly bred in captivity, so an 8 on availability. This is one of the hardiest of all the children's python species and has no special maintenance requirements. However, it doesn't tolerate as much cooling as the Stimson's python, a score of 7. A 3-foot tank complete with heat source, hide box and a newspaper substrate is adequate for a pair of these pythons, a score of 7. Will conveniently eat frozen thawed mice and small rats, an 8 in the fuel category. Blotch pythons are considered a beginner species, and while common, some of the recently developed morphs are attractive, a wow factor score of 3, giving a total score of 40. For the frilled neck lizard, at about $350 to $400 each, they are reasonably priced, a score of 7. Frill necks are not a simple species to breed, and there is often a shortage of hatchlings, a score of 6 on availability. These lizards do require year-round heat, a score of 6 on maintenance. Frill necks are not a suitable lizard for a small cage. A male and several females need an enclosure at least 3 meters by 2 meters by 1 meter, fitted with branches and several basking sites. Males should not be housed together, a score of 4. Frill necks do well on a diet of insects, with the occasional fuzzy mouse for a treat. However, they should also be offered vegetables mixed with cat food and a multivitamin and calcium phosphate supplement. This is essential to provide the full spectrum of required nutrients, but takes time and effort, a score of 1 on fuel. Even though captive specimens will seldom frill, this is indeed a very impressive lizard, a wow factor score of 9, giving an overall score of 33.